Good evening. I'd like to call the commission meeting for planning and zoning for November 29th to order. Can we have established a quorum?
Sure. Ms. Cartman?
I'm here.
Mr. Lester?
Here.
Mr. Hall?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Robertson?
Here.
Mr. Sorensen?
Here.
Commissioner Gordon?
Here.
And Secretary Lee.
Here.
Madam Chair, please let this record reflect that 9 members are present and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda? Okay. Are there any changes to the?
No, there are not.
Okay. Then I would ask for approval.
Make a motion that we approve the agenda for November 29th.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda stands approved. Next is the minutes for November 14th. Has everybody reviewed them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I have no additions. I'll move that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes stand approved. The item number 6 is commission member reports. I have none. Commissioner Gordon,
I have none.
any other commission members? Okay. And I do want to say, Michael, thank you for taking over and doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
So
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. So, okay. 7.
Yes, I do not have anything to report.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I forgot it. Mr. Secretary.
Yes. I do not have anything to report, and we do not have any extensions or BZA cases to cover, so item 7, I believe, is complete.
Okay. All right. We will move on to number 8, the Economic Development and Land Use Study.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today, I am joined with Ms. Sunderland from Economic Development, Mr. John Stover from John Stover and Associates, and Ms. Courtney Powell from Wampman Group, Inc., WGI. We came to you all 2 weeks ago on the 14th to present to you the findings for the Economic Development and Land Use Study. Between that time, we've asked the Commission if they could review the study. I know it's several pages long, to say the least, but we would hope that you review that and today provide any questions or comments you may have that we can answer. And then this study will then be finalized and be sent to the Board of County Commissioners for their review and approval. I'm going to pitch it over to Ms. Courtney Powell. And actually, I should say, maybe we'll start with any questions, or how would you like to work? I guess if anybody has any questions, just throw it to us, and we will try our best to answer them.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I will put it out. Does anybody have questions? We'll start with you.
Sure. So, first off, it's thick reading, but it tells a story. and it presents some options for where the story needs to continue to grow, to be, and all that kind of stuff. So tons of work, and I really enjoyed it. I was talking with Ralph earlier. He took more notes than I did. So I guess there's a million questions I could ask, but to get started, what is I understand the purpose of the study, to paint the vision forward and a roadmap forward. But and I don't know whether this is for Courtney or if it's for Andrew or Paige or anyone. What do you, if you boil it all down, what are the strengths of the county and what are the weaknesses of the county?
I don't know if you want me to answer that, or
Wherever you want to start. I mean,
I
or
think the consultant is the unbiased party, because I would tell you there are no weaknesses. Economic development.
Looking like economic development.
There you go.
Yeah, I think Courtney can tell
do you want to kick it off? And
Sure,
then-
I'll kick it off. I think that the strength is that you know who you are as a county. The people that live here know why they want to live here. They love the character, and they want it to remain the same character because they like it, and that's a wonderful place to be in. And I think that weakness from my vantage point is that because you guys are not growing in population, because you don't have a continual surge in investment coming in, but you do have some increased costs coming up, that there's
That's the challenge,
interplay there.
right.
That's the challenge.
So when you look at growth, and it's funny because I was overhearing a conversation, and I'll paraphrase it in saying that I'm not sure we want to be like some of the counties around us. It's like when they were talking about obscenity. I don't know what uber growth is, but I know it when I see it. And then it's too late. So what kind of growth would be a healthy growth for our county, yet sustain the quality of life that we seek to preserve? What should we be trying to hit?
Sure. So as I'm flipping to the page in this small document, I think that's a very valid and excellent question, and that is something that we kind of talked with as staff. And in the report, we did 4 growth scenarios, which kind of chart out what that population percentage is,
Right.
and how that marries with the budget, and also what kind of potential infrastructure costs that could incur at that growth rate. And so basically it was scenario C, which was the 3rd level growth rate that really seemed to kind of hit from an economic standpoint of making sure that you are pulling in enough revenue to kind of meet those extra infrastructure costs or other services that are needed, and still trying to encourage some population growth to offset that as well, without sacrificing the quality. And when we met with the community at the same time, it just so happened that the data and numbers matched the sentiment from the community, which fell within that scenario C, which we don't see all the time. So that's, I think, also a positive. Going back to the first question, is that a lot of these things are aligning early on in the process, and so as you go through your development plan, then you're kind of starting in a similar pool.
And if I may add, when the growth scenario C, when we all looked at that and we thought, well, this is one of the more, maybe the more obvious pick, it was very surprising that many people in the community, they understood that we need to have some growth in this county to sustain the level of services. So it was very, very, it's reassuring to know people understand this out the members of the general public. So that's, Just wanted to add that.
Good.
So when you, sticking with that growth scenario, and I saw the other three as well, and as I was reading and going through the options, I was like, well, C seems to be, and it turned out to be C. I got it right. So in my business, newspaper business, back in the day when it was good, we did budgets and we did expense and revenue budgets. We did updates, constantly. The formula was how much of a circulation base do we need to grow so that we can grow advertising revenue and pay for the staff and pay for the production and pay the electric bill and all that kind of stuff. Is it kind of similar here? So if we know that expenses are going up, workforce, fire and emergency services converting to employee, roads, education, school repairs, capital budgets, all that kind of stuff. We know what those numbers are, or we can get pretty darn close to what they're going to be, and then we backfill to what the tax base needs to be or the revenue needs to be, and that equals X amount of new homes, or that equals X amount of industrial permits, whatever it might be. Is that how this works?
If I could jump in and just make a quick point, and I'm going to try and be quiet because I want to hear the experts and so on, but something that you mentioned there and I think it's a little bit of a misconception sometimes, is that residential growth really does not necessarily equate to an increased tax base. Because a lot of, there's a tipping point. When you get a house, a residence of a certain value, yes, they cover their costs. But for the most part, residential development costs the county more than it brings in tax revenue, which is one reason why our ag preservation program is so important, because not only is it helping to sustain the most important industry in our county, but it also reduces the residential growth, which is a higher burden to the county from a services perspective. So every new residence is an increased cost from roads, maintaining roads, utilities, fire, EMS, police, schools, and so on. They're all those services that typically cost more than tax revenue from residents covers. So really the important, or the primary focus from an economic development perspective and from a tax base perspective is really looking at the commercial industrial tax base rather than residential.
I'm going to stay on the residential for 1 second, because you use the phrase tipping point for a household. How do we define that tipping point? Is it a value of the home? Is it household size? Because more kids, more teachers.
Right.
So what is the tipping point there?
So I don't know the dollar amount anymore. I'm sure there's
a range.
There's a range, yes. But so if you've got a $500,000 house, the taxes that you pay on that, and that, assuming that $500,000 house is a family of four or whatever, then you may have tipped over to where the taxes on that $500,000 house cover the services.
Services they're absorbing.
Right. Now, I'm making up a $500,000. I don't know what that number is.
It would be good to circle back and get a data point within a range. And then the last thing I'm going to ask is, over 50 communities, do they use more services than the taxes that they're generating, or is that good or bad for our?
That's a good question. I do not know the answer to that. I mean, obviously, they do not have the impact on schools, but they certainly have the impact on all the other services. The roads need to be plowed in front of them. Their fire, EMS, police still need to
Senior
respond.
services.
And exactly. Yep.
Yeah, that would be
a good
good to
question.
know. I mean, because I'm sorry, go ahead, Pete.
No, I'm just saying that, get back to you. I'm sorry.
Chris, I'd like to respond to something you just said about the ag preservation program. You're tooting my horn, and I'm so glad, because finally, this has been brought out. Why do you think we have a AAA rating? And one of the main reasons is when the bond people look at what Carroll County does and how we have basically done a slow growth system here in Carroll County, that has helped our bond rating. We have not overdone it in one big area here or another big area here, and they look at these things. And I remember having a conversation with Rob Burke quite a few years ago, and it took him a while to understand that too, but he soon realized that the Ag Preservation Program helped to push back on some of this rampant things that go on at certain times. So Carroll County is a little bit unique. We have this little island here with all this chaos around us, and but there's a reason for all this. It's called zoning.
Yeah. So,
Commissioner Gordon, do you have any thoughts on that?
Specifically relating to the ag pres or just?
Right.
I do think there's a lot of value in that. I mean, obviously, we've seen what's occurred in the areas around us. I mean, the one thing we've all talked about, and we talked about this several meetings ago, is there is a need for some type of inventory of housing across the board, be it apartments, be it single-family homes, those kind of things. So, I don't think anybody here is going to take the position that we don't need housing. As we all know right now, we're suffering from that, I think, pretty extensively. But then again, the entire nation is. That's not something that I think is new to just us. The one thing that I was not, I guess I'll say, surprised, and I don't know how everybody else felt in looking at what came out of this study, is how limited our commercial and industrial base is. And while it's a balancing act, and I know we all say that a lot, but it really truly is. And I think sometimes some in the public have a tendency to get maybe a little confused in that industrial or that property that's built is not going to bring in the level of revenue that they're assuming it is. It brings in more than, say, a home or development or anything of that matter, but that's not going to solve our issues either. But as mentioned earlier, we were talking about some of the big issues. As you mentioned, fire, EMS, blueprint for education is a big one right now. We don't know exactly where that's going to go, and I know you're hearing that constantly from the Commissioners, Board of Education, and everyone else, but those are some of the big challenges we have. And, how do we work that into planning for not just now, but 20 years down the road?
Thank you.
I know for me, looking at all this and being in the construction industry, I see everything from Northern Virginia out to Washington County to the Eastern Shore to Southern PA. And Carroll County really, really, really is, it's, I don't want to say it's a black hole, but it is compared to everything else around us. And the trick is obviously so many people that are not natural born Carroll Countyans, they come to Carroll County because they want to get away. I was born and raised in Anne Arundel County, and it's a hot mess because they will put a house or something, if there's a spare piece of land, they'll build something on it. So many people leave those areas to come here because they want that. So even with the natural born Carroll Counties, no, we want it to be rural. But the people that move to Carroll County, no, we want it to be rural. And you talk about with like the apartments and things like that, okay, that's great, but how do we do that? Because the trend everywhere now is not, oh, we're gonna build a 4-story, 30-unit apartment. We're building a 500,000 square foot, 400-unit city in and of itself. I mean, the company I work for, we're doing so many of those. You really don't see these little apartment buildings anymore. So are we going to get a developer that's going to come up here that's not going to be able to put one of these mega buildings on? And it's amazing the size of building they can put on a 5-acre piece of land. So it's just really, it's tricky. How do we keep everything how it is when just the trends elsewhere? And if you look at Frederick County, because Frederick itself became a DC suburb, because as it got more and more and more expensive, everybody pushed into Frederick. Now you're seeing in Frederick, which is the same thing, used to be very much like Carroll County. Now, houses everywhere, these mega apartment buildings everywhere. And okay, if you go to northern Frederick County, yes, it's still rural, Thurmont, all that good stuff. But when you get down around the city of Frederick itself, you don't know if you're in Northwest DC or if you're in the city of Frederick, because they're just people on top of people on top of people, and it's just such a fine line to do it, not just what I see, just construction trends elsewhere, because like I said, you don't see developers wanting to do a little apartment building, like, if they're gonna do it, and it just doesn't fit in Carroll County with everything that's going on right now.
Well, I might add, to respond to just a couple of things that have been stated, and Chris, I thought you teed it up. I mean, what you said was pretty close to verbatim what I was gonna go for, but I would emphasize, like, the really big takeaways that I see, especially from a general fund vantage point, is the growth rate of commercial needs to grow at a faster clip than the growth rate of residential. I think that's a really big takeaway. But then to a number of the questions that you asked of, well, so what is that tipping point of residential? To what extent more does commercial need to grow than residential? How much commercial, and what's the value proposition such that would be willing to kind of help incentivize that? And what communities and where, location-wise, are net winners versus losers? All those questions we thought of also during this process and was not in the scope of this work. And I don't know how many times we said, one of the next steps that you need to do is do that kind of fiscal analysis, is really, because we know in broad strokes where we need to go. And I think that what this study did is help tee that up, right? The community was really pretty lockstep. It was pretty aligned in a nice way. And conveniently, that aligns with the fiscal realities, with the kind of just identity realities of the county, with your infrastructure limitations. So all the kind of movement is in the same general direction, and we know these, what we need to do. And I think that, again, is the importance of this study of, you have now the data and the justification to prove that, but now I think it's refine that a little more specifically, so you actually know what those value propositions are, so you can make even more informed decisions.
So are you saying that this study then should give us a framework of what we should key on? So if the next study comes along, you're telling us that it should be keyed on commercial industrial development and where it should be and how we should approach it.
That's right. And what we're not saying is that there needs to be a ton, right? That's not in keeping, nor is there the market demand for just a huge swell. But what we know is that over time, there needs to be a greater growth rate on the commercial side than the residential side.
So what do we need to do to increase that? I know surrounding counties have all the tech companies that swarm to them. And of course, we don't have a lot of that infrastructure. So what do we need to put in place to make that happen?
So, to a large extent, also, I don't know. I know there's not a silver bullet, right? Because we work to answer those questions all around the country, and it'd be so nice if there was just an easy slam dunk, but if there was, everybody would do it. We do know that we did a kind of really kind of light lift fiscal impact analysis of kind of looking at the different employers, the major employers that you have in the county, and if we were to attract some more of them, to what extent does that move the needle on general fund revenue? And the answer is, it does, but again, not in any kind of silver bullet kind of proposition. So there's not just, if we just incentivize one employer or one institution or a couple of heavy hitters, then we're good to go. It's more of a kind of a slow build to get there over time. But what we do know is more and more of, okay, well, what are the conditions that are attracting those types of employers? Well, you frankly have it. It's relatively close to the major markets such as Baltimore and DC, but they're high quality of life, placemaking, better value proposition, the type of places where employees want to live, and more people are moving away from. So there is a residential component that will drive, having additional housing that employees can live in can also help, spur commercial development. So you have a lot of the bones for it, but I think that frankly, and actually that's what I had in my notes too, if there was kind of two, if I could dream of like, what were the kind of two next steps that you would do kind of building off of the study, again, one is that fiscal analysis, and then one is that more action. Okay, well, so then more specifically, and especially based off the information that you would learn from the fiscal analysis, okay, now what? Kind of given, limited resources, where would we want to pool our efforts to help try to drive commercial growth?
And then to marry that kind of with the zoning and land use side, once you kind of know more of those pieces and, you know, what we did with what John and his team did with some of those projections for some of those industry types, is looking at your current land use and your future land use and how it's currently set up and where some of those industries have the opportunity to go to. And Paige is an expert at knowing all of that at the back of her hand. But we also kind of dived into, are there certain parcels currently that maybe are not slated correctly that would be an easy change during your general development process that would then lend to helping add some more available opportunities for those types of industries. And then kind of going to your point to take it a couple steps further, there is a way that when you do your general development plan or your comprehensive plan process, and even through your code process, you can marry pro formas and types of developments that you do want, and you can pencil those out, and so you can write your regulations that is what gets built. And so by working with the numbers at the same time that you're doing zoning and land use really helps make that vision come to life, and you're getting what the community wants, what you want, what works financially from a budget standpoint and everything, as opposed to writing something on a piece of paper and hoping that that's what is really what you want. But when you marry the development and the economic side to that type of process, really kind of makes that happen.
So do you think that the way we define commercial and industrial needs to be rewritten or further defined, segmented, or?
I think, you know, depending on, I think, what types of industries eventually, you know, are really targeted, making sure that your definitions from a zoning standpoint are up to date, or either have the flexibility to grow with terminology of that day and age,
Okay.
is important.
Mhm.
Now, let me ask you this. I mean, obviously you guys do this around the nation. Do you think that maybe Carroll County's reputation as a sleepy agricultural county plays into people kind of skipping over us, being like, oh, we're not going there, all that's up there is farmland, you know, that might not be familiar with Carroll County and not realize, I mean, just like you're saying, you know, access to I mean, you really are. I mean, you can get to Western Maryland, you know, the city, DC. You know, do you think our reputation as an agricultural sleepy county helps when people are trying to start a business this or that? Well, I'm not going to go there because it's just farms, and it's really not.
I mean, from my viewpoint, I would say that I'm actually seeing, again, from the kind of planning land use side.
Speak up a little bit,
Yeah,
please.
sure.
Farmer, I can't hear.
That I'm actually seeing a lot of other areas similar to Carroll County where the rural agricultural heritage is there and still very prominent in that quality of life that the residents want, but they are seeing some of that vitality synergy happening in those smaller towns that you also have. So I'm kind of seeing that there's a resurgence. I think that there is a time and place and a type of industry and business that works well in those, and versus those hustling and bustling kind of areas. So I don't think there's a one size fits all, and you know, so that's just kind of what I've been seeing on my side of the industry.
If I could join in just for a minute as the expert here. It's a great thought, question, comment. I think in the last 20 or so years, Carroll has changed its reputation, at least throughout the state. Yes, we were the stepchild, we were the redhead stepchild, and we were looked over. We've really been aggressive in trying to get the word out. I think we've been very successful doing what we've done with what we have. But I don't think that throughout the state now that we're looked at as the sleepy or the redhead stepchild.
I totally agree with that. I think some neighboring counties are looking at us and saying, I wish we would have. sure of that. I know that. So I agree with you, Paige, 100%.
We've had, we've gone through a lot of iterations in Carroll. Many of you I've known for many, many, many years. And you probably have seen those changes as well. And I mean, I think we're at a point where we've made ourselves known in the state. We've become a leader in manufacturing. As I said, we're very aggressive in going out there and finding the targets and landing them when we can. As you've seen in the study, we need help. We need land. We need developable land. We need the infrastructure. Without that, we can't raise that tax base.
Following up on that, I'd like to talk about a specific site, and that's the Harrison-Lashir property,
Yes.
which the county owns.
Yes.
We paid a lot of money for that through a legal, we won't get into that, but the county owns it. It's just sitting there. It's right near Mount Airy. You know, so we have good access to interstates, and it's just sitting there. Why doesn't the county, I mean, we've already spent, I think, $30 million to get the property. Let's continue on, get the infrastructure in there and do something with it. Get a developer in there to, you know, to take over once we have that infrastructure.
And that site did make the list of some of the top sites, top large sites in the county. There have been some developers that have shown interest in that site, and unfortunately, we're unable to move forward, given some of the requests through annexation and trying to determine if their plan would work within the town limits of Mount Airy. You know, to develop that property without the proper infrastructure with the water and the sewer, we would lose the value of it in that regard.
And I understand that the infrastructure needs to get in there, and that's gonna cost money.
Yes.
But once it's in there, I think the county has a very valuable piece of property down there that's just been sitting for years.
So you're saying that in this case, with that property in particular, it's a municipality problem that's holding it up? Is that kind of what you're?
No. That's not what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that there were some challenges in annexing in and on the developer side to realize or to be confident that their project as envisioned would happen. There was some uncertainty. And I think there's another project going on down there right now, and you've probably read about it in the paper. And I think, you know, every project there's uncertainty with. I mean, that's a certain, but in my last update about that particular project, I did hear concerns that what they had envisioned to begin with is now really have step back. And I don't know if it'll happen at the end of this. How much can you give up and still come away with a successful project? You know, and it's gonna take the developer and the town really coming to some agreements, probably some give on both sides.
So talk a little bit about one of the, talking about business attraction here, and one of the recommendations was a community liaison. Would that be new to the county?
Yeah, so this would be,
And describe what that role would that be a traveling salesperson, you know, knocking on doors saying, hey, come to Carroll County? You know, what's the matter with you?
so I think the way that it's more intended to be is obviously you have the Economic Development Department of the county and their services and the liaison services that they bring. And so this is more of, I think, being a liaison with the community of what kind of industries may be coming in, and kind of acting as more of like from, because Paige, typically you work with the developer or them specifically to help them bring them into the county, get their entitlements through that process. And this would kind of be similar, but more on the community side.
That particular comment came from one of our stakeholder interviews. It was not an internal comment, nor did it come right from the consultant. It was something that in the stakeholder interviews, which represented businesses, development, nonprofits, building owners, we went across the board. And that was something that someone had brought up. If I remember correctly, it was more in terms of someone to, as Courtney said, kind of work on the community side of it. I'm not even sure how that would work, but it was included in the report because it was a suggestion that was made. And I think the intent of it was to maybe try to ease some of that uncertainty on, maybe a community and the developer. And kind of trying to bring that together, because yes, my department just typically focuses with a developer or the business.
Process.
Sure.
Did you feel, or did you get any sense that the process it was a problem? Put it
The
that
development
way.
process?
The development process, the 20 agencies, the steps, the length of time, because we hear that from developers here saying, I wish it wouldn't take so long. Did you have any thoughts or recommendations about that?
So we looked at it more holistically. We didn't get into necessarily like permit times and, all of that and how many resubmittals but we did hear that stormwater, that usually takes the longest, and that's pretty typical anywhere you're at. One thing we did talk as an internal team was kind of a priority process. And that is something that has been recently implemented. And so that was really just kind of the recommendation, if you want to call it that, is when we were going through this process, and the county already had that forethought too. And so that's already an action item that can be checked off.
I would say there's in this work, there's some recurring themes that take place in every single municipality, every county that you work in. No matter where you go, everybody's going to complain about the approvals and permitting process. So to a main extent, it's pretty normal from my eyes. But we still did, and across the interviews, still heard some horror stories. Still a bunch of folks saying, one of the farmers had to build a barn, and it took, I forget how long and how much money, and that kind of thing. And so I do think that there is an opportunity to continue to streamline. And I frankly, I think you've taken the right step. But that would be the major
the expediting comments that you made. Yeah.
So I don't know that, so we have not, the priority review process is relatively new, and it really doesn't affect you all as far as the process. It's more of the staff processes. But just so you're, to bring you up to speed with what has been put in place and working with the Board of County Commissioners, is that if a project is determined that there is a reason for priority. There's an urgency, there's a significant benefit to the citizens of the county, and so on. The Board of County Commissioners can basically designate that as a priority review. And so certain things then happen that are different from the regular process, basically an enhancement of the process. So there is more interaction between technical staff and the developer, so that we require more meetings. We really work with the developer hand in hand to get through the process. When submissions are made, they're done immediately. They're reviewed immediately, so the process is quicker. The turnaround is much quicker. And we also produce a monthly report that reports to all the stakeholders, including the Board of County Commissioners, what's the current progress and what are the current holdups, if there are, what are the issues, how they've been resolved, and so on. So really, it works through the process much quicker. The balance that we have to strike is that it takes additional resources. So while it would be nice to treat every project that way, we just don't have the resources for that. So, so that's the balance that we work with the Board of County Commissioners as far as we definitely appreciate that there are projects that Paige brings to the table and so on that should go through that process. But how many and managing staff resources and so on is very important.
Well, and it's also the case, if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority.
Exactly.
And so, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's an issue.
And maybe that's where that fiscal analysis comes in to play. If there's a project that's going to ring the register for, improving the tax base, and, that could be an A priority versus, something else.
Well, on that note, something that we also looked into is kind of what moves the needle the most on a tax-based vantage point. And there's a pretty clear hierarchy of first, having more employment, more jobs located in the county. That's the biggest chunk in terms of the revenue that comes and the net revenue that comes to the county. The next is having high-paying jobs. So it's even better if, there's more taxable income there. And then the next is the assessed value of the commercial property. And that sequence, though, is exactly how the county prioritizes, and Paige's department prioritizes it. So like that was nice to see that.
We're doing it right.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like to point out, I know the bond was brought up earlier, and one of the numbers we always look at is the percentage of the commercial and industrial base compared to, residential and ag. I don't know exactly, but it's about 12%. And so I never really thought that was a big number. Compared to other counties, it's not. When you say it's 12% for 1.2% of land that's actually zoned for industrial, and less than 0.5% of land that's zoned commercial, that's big numbers. And I was shocked by that, honestly. I'd never really seen it black and white, like was presented in this study to us. So, I think that's a big number for the amount of land that we have that could, but that's actually in production right now in commercial and industrial, not just even what could be.
For commercial and industrial land, we have less than 5% of the county's land area.
It's 1.2 industrial, 0.5% of commercial, and I think, 1% employment campus?
Yeah,
Right around- yeah,
the
so
total
around-
was about 1,000 acres of all three, something like
And
that.
a lot
Yeah.
of those, a lot of those acres that we look at and that are part of that 1.2 or 0.5% or are not, they're not reasonably zoned, because they're out, not gonna pick on anybody, but Union Bridge has a ton of IR zone land, but Lehigh owns it. Lehigh uses it. Another one Drew and I talked about frequently was, you'll look in the study, and Finksburg has 100 and some acres. That's great. But it's owned by Congolium. It's not marketing, it's not marketable, they're not selling it, it's their property.
Yeah. In Finksburg, you even have the BGE, that substation down there.
That sits on a quite large land.
Yeah.
So, as you go through that study, and some of those numbers, they look big, but in reality, it's not. And as Courtney said, as I went through that whole list, and I'm like, well, no, that one doesn't work, this one doesn't work, this one, for all these particular and specific reasons to that property, whether it be it doesn't have the infrastructure to it and could not without a huge investment, whether it's that the property owner just doesn't care, which many don't, They don't care, you know, their kids might do something with it eventually. Another property owner says, I just want to hunt on it. I don't want to develop it, which is great. But this is part of what we consider our inventory of industrial land. So our inventory isn't completely usable.
Usable, right.
Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, we can go through the list one day and talk about why not. There's several good opportunities, but there's a lot on that list that, for specific reasons, would not be able to be developed.
So shouldn't this study have reflected what is usable industrial commercial land and what is not?
Shovel-ready land?
Exactly. In other words, why would you even count Lehigh? Because we all know it's gonna be a big hole in the ground and a lot of berms around it and dust flowing out everywhere.
Right, and
We know
I'll let
that.
Courtney speak to the scope of this
You know,
study.
we know Congolium is not gonna do anything unless all of a sudden it puts it up for sale, so it's not even viable. So shouldn't this study have reflected what's really there available and then look at what could be available?
So we took both approaches, and this is something that we had talked as a team. So the data, the GIS data that we did use, did look at what is developable land. So if there, you know, is some environmental resource constraint on it, that portion is not included. But when we were developing the list, what we did was we assigned scores to all of the properties based on a multitude of different factors. And some of those factors are things that you had mentioned. And so those that are ranked between, let's just say 1 and 5, they're ranked in order in the list. Those are the ones that are the most shovel-ready to go today. But we did not want to short the list in a small snapshot, that as you're going through your development, your comprehensive plan process, you can look at this list and also take into account what the situation is today. But if there's anything that the needle could change in the future, and what that change would be, that you do want to continue to consider to map out for the next 10 years, or 25 years, whatever it is, you still have that resource there to look back at. So we did not want to short the vision for now to 5 years. We wanted to give you the chance to see, you know, what really would need to move on this, or this needle really is not going to be moving, and so that's why it's at the bottom of the list.
Well, following up on that, what about in the Eldersburg area, the Beatty property and Wolf property? Where does that stand in your main?
So that one is, if I remember, is towards the top.
It was one of the top 5,
Yeah.
Beatty was.
And, you know, there's, to say, you know, what Paige has already wonderfully said, you know, there are minute details to each of these, so it is not a silver bullet just by looking at the list. But removing the historic district requirements, I remember that came out early during our process, that was no longer, you know, part of some of the constraints to the property. Sometimes that is a positive as well, you know, it depends what the project is and who's working on it.
I think Courtney was speaking to Warfield about the
Oh, yeah,
historic.
sorry, yeah.
There are plans on Beatty that have been
Yes,
submitted.
and then the Beatty one, yeah, because I think that one, there were plans, and then it came off, and then it came back, and then, so,
Because that's an example of a good mixed-use
yes,
site.
yes,
So
exactly.
it's not just more houses.
Yep, and we even kept, you know, the Beatty property is a great example of how when we originally were developing the list, there was a proposal, and so we're like, well, do we take that off? And then things changed, and we decided, you know, let's keep it on the list, and then depending on where you are in the timeline, you know, it's a record.
Good. Glad to hear it.
I'd like to say, as a father of 3 20-couple-year-old daughters, that all 3 of them don't want anything to do with Carroll County, because You know, they want to be places where they don't have to drive. They want to have the kind of job where, you know, they can work from home quite a bit, but then get there. You know, we have a lot of middle-of-the-road jobs in Carroll County, but none of those higher-paying kind of jobs, you know, high-tech kind of stuff. What do we do about trying to keep, because, you know, like, the older people want to move here to get away from it all, but the younger people want to go to it. So where is there a balance of that? You know, I think Westminster's come a long ways in the last 10 to 15 years or 20 years since I was younger. That's gotten better, but without newer properties built, you know, there's really no place for them to live in a city center like that. And what do you do about that?
Yeah, and in fact, in the study, our consultants did student surveys. So we did Carroll Community College, and we tried to do some outreach to McDaniel as well. We didn't get a whole lot of responses, unfortunately, and I can't recall, you know, but a lot of them were, they would, if I recall correctly, if there was an opportunity of a job that would match their skill sets, then they would be interested in staying. But a lot of them said, like, it just didn't exist.
And both on I remember hearing that on jobs, but also housing, right? Like, there's not a lot of available housing stock, and the housing stock that there isn't super diverse. And there's pros and cons. Like, generally, the populace likes that because, you know, and you have just such a lovely feel to the county. But providing more housing stock, I think, would help attract more folks as well, especially younger folks in their 20s. You can't live in a single-family home, you know, and pay for that. They have to live in an apartment. I don't know about your daughters, but I did when I was in
And with the roads that we have in Carroll County, you know, the congestion's bad enough that they don't want to drive to Howard County, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, Montgomery County, because it's just too much time in a car, and our younger people don't want to sit in a car all day, so.
And it's interesting, this study, it did pull out 70% of our workforce commutes out of the county to work. We have a lot of people that come in, as you all probably know, from Pennsylvania. A lot of workers at the Air Business Park. We did a survey many years ago. I think it was close to 60% of the workers throughout all the employers in the park at that time, their employee base had come out of Pennsylvania because we do pay more down here. But again, it is the balance of, you have to have a quality park to attract maybe some of these tech. I mean, we have high-tech manufacturing, but, you know, a Google or, you know, something like that, we don't have somewhere to put them. Just to give you a real short example, yesterday I had a call with a site selector who has a client looking for 100,000 square feet in the county. Not a big ask in terms of amenities or, you know, I need 17 loading docks or anything like that, just 100,000 square feet. I have nothing. I have nothing to show them, nothing. And that's unfortunate.
So the employers that are here in Carroll County, let's just pick one, Vapco, Norbrake, are they keeping up as far as keep having enough workforce to move forward, to expand, I mean, are they keeping up with the trends of the workforce?
So far, so good, because actually Kenora is a priority project that we're working on with Chris's department right now. They are working on an expansion right now. It's mainly for product because of COVID and supply chains, and they're just storing really valuable stuff outside. And Vapco is also planning a 45,000 square foot office expansion, creating 275 jobs with that. It's huge. Now, they're very specialized jobs, especially out of Vapco. Most of them are engineering. Those employers really, they go out and do a lot of recruitment themselves to colleges, you know, engineering universities and colleges. So they feel confident enough in the market to do that investment.
The reason I ask you that, Paige, I had a conversation with a couple people I understand there's quite a waiting list for kids to get into the VOTEC Center now. Are we providing the type of educational opportunities for people to take these technical jobs, mechanics, technicians, computer experts? Are we keeping up on that end of it? That's what concerns me, because when I hear that there's a waiting list for kids to get into the VOTEC Center, I'm wondering how many children are not being serviced that maybe don't have that high level to qualify to get in, but to have that great skill down here.
Right.
And that kind of concerns me. I'm such an advocate of the tech center out here and the vocation. I mean, do we need more of that? That's really my underlying question here.
Yeah.
Especially after talking to a couple of these kids.
Right. Our Workforce Development Center, formerly known as BERC, as many of you may know it, they work hand in hand with employers, constantly outreach to employers. They have a virtual job platform now, where we're holding job fairs online, like literally you put up your little booth online. Work closely with the Career and Technology Center. They literally just hired, I think, 3 positions focused solely on Blueprint. They will be working with the Board of Education. So the Workforce Development Center really is providing those services. They did a customized training for welding and provided the training money through the federal government. I think they had about 15 participants in that. We also helped fund Carroll Community College's CDL licensing. So while we're not putting kids in the career and tech programs, we are trying to get them out of the program and into a job. In fact, I believe we talked to Kenora Brake when we were up there. Commissioner Gordon was with us, and they talked, actually one of the executive's sons had come out of the program, they had hired him. So most of the employers know about that, and if they don't, we put them in touch with them and lead them to those resources. But I can't speak to the wait list, and how that's being held.
I would say, I had 2 daughters that went to tech, and, one of them works in the field she went to, but one of the things I noticed that I was disappointed with is when the students graduated, you hear what they're all going to do, and so many of them are not even going to go to that field, that they took a spot that somebody else couldn't get in, but, that they, because your brightest students get into tech normally, you're ones with better, grades and better attendance, because I know attendance is very important for tech. And so I think we're missing a lot of students, because I know a lot of kids that, could have used, welding or stuff like that, that didn't have a chance to get in because other people bumped them out. And then, I guess, I don't know how you really correct that, except make more room for more students, but, and I know we've been working on that, so.
Is there any room for expansion on your career in tech?
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. That's certainly a Board of Ed question.
It is. But I think it's probably a lot of job training even past that. I don't know how much more they do that. When I was younger, I went to public school as a high schooler, and my grades weren't that good, so tech was out for me. And but I went and did welding classes and stuff later on that helped me down the line, and a lot of people did. I don't know if they still offer as many night classes for that kind of stuff, because I'm sure they have a hard time hiring enough teachers for all that also.
And the Workforce Development Center works closely with the community college in some of the customized programs that, like, let's say a Kenora Brake, is trying to bring 20 people in for CAD skills or whatever it might be. And there's also federal government funding that can assist with that. So we, as a Department of Economic Development, we're constantly out with businesses. We're listening to them. We're hearing what they need, and we're connecting them with those resources. So when we touch a business, we're giving them all that and more. And there have been businesses that I have visited personally, I never knew you guys did all this. And we, you know, we used to say, oh, we're the best kept secret in Carroll County. I mean, we're advertising, not just my department services, our Small Business Development Center, Carroll Workforce Development, Burke across the street. We're advertising, and we're still trying to get the word out. But when we do connect those businesses with some of these resources, literally, it's like the light bulb went off in their head. They're just, I never knew you guys could help me with this. So, and I think you guys heard that through some of the stakeholder interviews we did.
So this conversation has pretty well boiled down to business, business, business. And then everything else follows. In other words, what you're telling us in your study, maybe I'm wrong, but what you're telling us in study is if you key on the elements of what pays the most for the county, what's the economic driver that makes people come here and want to live here and stay, the business and industry, then everything else follows in its wake. Is that what we're hearing? I mean, this is what the conversation's rolling around about here. You're telling us, and I think we all know that rampant development does not do anything but have some misery with it, in a way. I'll put it another way. But good, clean business is what we're looking for, and we do have good, clean business here. We have good green business and good clean business. Then the rest follows. Is this what this study has boiled down to?
Either way.
You take it from an economic standpoint, and
Yeah.
I'll take it through.
I would say that I think that's too strongly stated. Why I was emphasizing business was especially from a tax-based vantage point, whereas like there's some room for concern in the upcoming years, and the easiest remedy, like there's many different paths forward. The cleanest path forward is to have an increase in commercial tax base at a greater clip. But I actually think it's what drives the county. Where's there the most demand? What kind of creates the fabric of life that we have here? Well, that's ag and rural, and that's residential. So I think that actually that is not commercial. I think that's the rub, where like what we want more of is the thing where there's not as strong a demand to come here. And then also what helps drive that commercial demand is the residential and the outdoor recreation and the open space. So you kind of almost need to lean further on some of those other uses to help attract and pull in commercial uses. So I think it's a much more complicated, nuanced story from my perspective.
Okay.
And I think some of the falling into place kind of pieces thought is once you kind of land on a path or a vision forward that you want marrying in the economic development side, then that's where the zoning and land use really kind of then comes in to help support that and make it happen, because your standards and regulations is what makes that happen, right? And so if you don't have the right land available, or maybe there is a parcel here that if all you have to do is change maybe the future land use to one category over and then have the right zoning, now you've opened up a parcel that's maybe next to one already appropriately zoned, and now you have a better package that then the infrastructure can come to. And so that's kind of where the pieces start falling into play.
Mm-hmm. But I see, in other words, I listen to Frederick Station every morning, so I go through Urbana now and I have no idea where I am anymore. But then I listen to the station and it seems like everybody that lives in Frederick and Urbana is heading to Washington, D.C. So is Frederick County, let's just take them as an example, is Frederick County keeping up with their industrial and commercial base, or are they not? Because it looks like they've raced to the development side of it have they kept up with the commercial and industrial side? If they haven't, then everybody's racing to a government job in DC. And that's not gonna help that county, as far as I'm concerned, or our county, if that would be the case. So I go back to my premise then of keep them home if we can, so how do we keep them home?
Mhm. And I think that goes back to, I think Carroll is positioned in a well spot right now, because you do have your surrounding county neighbors that have grown, rapidly. And so you have the opportunity to kind of look and see how that happened, while you can say, okay, this is what we really want to be, or we already know what we want to be, and so let's thoughtfully make that happen. And you don't have to have people go to other counties if you don't want to, or you only want certain industries. And again, I mean, there's a fulcrum there. You have to have a mix of things, but at the same time, you're at a critical point, in my viewpoint, that you have things to look at, and you haven't outrun your coverage, and you can say, we can thoughtfully go through this. And I think that's why the county wanted to do this study, was to help bring some of that to light, so when you do your comp plan process, that you can really have these thoughtful discussions and start making those major policy decisions and talk about what those cost benefits are.
And one more question, and that is, if we have so much of our workforce not working, if we have a lot of our workforce coming to Carroll County to work that lives in Pennsylvania, are they adding anything to our tax base? Are they adding anything to our economic position? So keep them home?
Well,
Bring them in?
if
What?
they go to a restaurant, or they buy gas here, or shop,
That'd be Royal Farms, I mean,
yeah, unfortunately, the income tax only comes from.
exactly, that's what
So,
that's what I'm
the
getting
more
at.
people we can, especially because we do border and out of state, keep them in Carroll, but keep them in Maryland is, what we say. So certainly, if we have them in Carroll, we get that income tax that John talked about, which is that's like the number one revenue generator. So, yes, by creating those jobs, we're giving their kids, I have a 22-year-old myself, and you don't want to come back here, He's in Towson, I can go anywhere, I can do anything. What jobs are out there for me, Mom? And it's unfortunate, and I do think that, by creating something, and maybe the Beatty property is be a small something like that, of this mixed use sort, where we can create those opportunities for the younger generation to find those interesting and unique jobs that interest them, because they're in a different world as far as I'm concerned with my son, like, what are you talking about? I don't even understand your language. But anyway, to create those opportunities that would interest that generation, and also those amenities that go along with it. So they do, that's what they want. And we've talked about this too, and successful developments bring that to the table with, just don't stick a business park out in the middle of nowhere and just, that doesn't help the business, it doesn't help the residents, it doesn't help the younger workforce that we're trying to keep here. So I think it's about creating something special, the employment type campus that, the county's batted around for years. But, the point of the study was really just to, as the county embarks on this comp plan, the growth plan, to recognize the fact that there is a lot of perception out there of we're overgrown, we have too much of this, we have too much of that. And real quick, I just want to read you a stat I pulled today. Vacancy rate for industrial buildings today, 1.9%. The Baltimore Metro submarket is 6.4%. 1.9% of our industrial buildings are vacant. When I said we have no product, we have no product. And I think it's looking at the information that our consultants pulled together and some things that we know here from planning and development review and economic development, and having these real stats to come together and go, all right, how can we work on this comprehensively? You know, bringing in, again, the housing component, that's gonna have to be discussed at some point, and whatever else planning brings into it, transportation study, I guess.
Have you found that some of these developers for some of these industrial sites, has anybody, or is it a common occurrence that they ask for tax breaks, things like that? Like, for example, Port Covington in Baltimore City, to develop that land, which is kind of counterproductive, because obviously if the county wants the tax revenue, you can't say you don't have to pay taxes for 30 years.
Right.
You know, do you find that as something that people ask for frequently to that degree, or?
Maybe every time. Everyone's gonna make that ask. Do they get it? The answer is no.
Okay.
You know, historically, we haven't looked at tax rebates. Pennsylvania does that for 10 years, and that almost killed one of our really big deals that we had here, because they talked about free taxes for 10 years, but after 10 years, your school tax, you're paying more. Your 11th year, your break is over. I mean, yes, they ask, but that's not, and that's, you know, unfortunately, I've had a couple of times where people are like, well, how can I take it, what do I have to do to get an incentive? If it's not your business model, you shouldn't have to, you know, change who you are in order to fit some model of maybe you'll give me a couple bucks. But tax breaks, they'll ask for them every time, yes.
You know, I'm listening to all this, and I'm working on an RFP for the city of Durham and for their retirement plan. And it strikes me because all the respondents to that are large organizations, and all of their call centers are not centralized. The people at the call centers are working from home. There's a data center that's centralized, and there is a call center, but for the most part, the person answering your phone is probably in their living room, a den, or a spare bedroom. And I think of, you know, I know the guys at PayPal in my office building. They had 4 floors, and they're now down to 1. And all those people are working from home. I know the 3rd largest engineering firm, headquartered in Maryland, they've accelerated their plans to be zero carbon, to be carbon neutral, because they're letting people work remotely. And so there are a lot of trends like that I don't think we can really anticipate. We couldn't have anticipated 5 years ago, and we can certainly envision them today. The other thing is that, and I've talked about my prior life when I was in commercial real estate, and so I won't bore you with all that, but I got to tell you, I mean, we put a shovel in the dirt north of Atlanta, and it was about 2,000 acres, had all the infrastructure known to man, and we thought we were the smartest people in the world. And then we were going nowhere. I mean, just no one was coming. We hung the shingle out, and we were talking, but nobody was listening. And then all of a sudden, somebody built a really nice golf community called Country Club of the South. Smoltz, Glavin, all those guys moved in there, and they were playing golf on their days off. My point is that all of a sudden, we became the place to be. And it had nothing to do with, you know, how smart we were. It had nothing to do with what great developers we were. It was just a synergy of the willingness of the county to work with us, the infrastructure that we had data lines, and we could promise no interruption in electricity and all these kinds of things to that park. And now that you know, the park turned out great. I mean, everybody made money and nobody lost a dime. But there was a time there when we honestly thought it wasn't going to work. And it was when all of a sudden we had this housing where these decision makers were like, you know, I don't want to drive 30 miles to, you know, I want to put my office building right there, you know, 3 miles from my golf course and from my home too. And so there was a synergy there of things that all worked together that created, you know, employment, housing, all of that all at once. And again, we thought we were smart. I'm telling you, if that golf course doesn't get built, I'm not sure Sibagagi or anybody shows up in that office park. And now they're there. That's where their U.S. headquarters are. And so, you know, it's a lot. When we talk about economic development, it's not one thing, it's all things. It's we're talking about education. It is. I mean, if we want robotics, pharmaceuticals, electronics, data centers, and these types of people, if we want those kind of jobs here, we have to be educating, we have to have the people to take those jobs. So I know I'm rambling, but I mean, it really is a top-down thing. I think we all have got to be rowing the same way. And so I don't know where I'm headed here, other than to say that I don't think it's a one thing, right? It's all of the above. Is that not right? Okay.
That was kind of beautiful. I agree.
And I'll just add one thing that's kind of different than what we've talked about so far, but when you come to the ag part, I've read all through that, and, it gets talking about things you needed in ag, and, they're talking about agritourism and stuff, and it goes through talking about what this does for the community, but at the end of the day, they're not money makers for the most part. Most big agritourism, like wineries, people that have money go build a winery, and they break even after a couple of years, and then they're happy that they're not losing money anymore.
Something that really stood out to me going through this process was that's true, but the flip is kind of true also, where a lot of the ag that doesn't have any tourism component, they're having a hard time breaking even too. So it's really kind of mixing and matching and having as much revenue generation activity as possible. And so just, so many of the farmers and the different folks that we spoke to in ag were like, yeah, we need to have space rental. We need to have something that is bringing that additional revenue.
Well, and there's no hotel. There's no bed and breakfast to be there to support the.
Got
tourism.
Airbnbs now.
Yeah, Airbnb.
But secondary processing is what you need in agriculture to make it viable, where you're not shipping everything away somewhere, because, it's a high volume of traffic on the roads. So, used to be a fun business, and one day, I tell everyone it's not quite so fun anymore.
Matt, I'm just going to say, I think you're missing the boat, because I would pay you $10 to let me come out and milk a cow. just to get.
But that liability would cost me 20.
You get kicked once, and that costs him $10 million.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Well, there's nothing to hurt up here, so you're good.
Quick question. Earlier you were talking about some of the properties down in the southern part of the county. And of course, when you look at Carroll County, you have a lot of diversity in the type of land usage. We've got 8 municipalities. Majority of that growth is in those 8 municipalities, and we've got one designated growth area in the southern portion of the county. What was sort of the findings, and what was your impression regarding that designated growth area in the southern part of the county?
So we did have conversations with the different municipalities, and again, it kind of comes back to the comprehensive plan process. I think having the designated growth areas is very beneficial in the planning sense. And obviously that's, where you have a lot of your infrastructure, and it gives just a good guide for where that growth is going to happen. And so, I think there will need to be further conversations about, if any of that needs to be expanded, or how currently the county zoning and future land use maybe matches or doesn't align very well at those border lines, so you can have, those right developments happen. So that's kind of where a lot of our conversation centered around, was especially looking at the current boundary lines and what's kind of happening there today, and how that may play out through these additional conversations.
Okay. So I know obviously you've got, say, in the southern part of the county, you've got, 70 down there. So you've got a component where, we're talking 70% of the community is commuting to work. So it's obviously ideal for them. When you're looking at housing prices, say in the Westminster area versus on the southern portion, it's typically much higher down there because of that connection to the neighboring areas. I was just kind of curious if you were seeing that as more of a positive, that we have that ability with that designated growth area, or if that was something that, you know, there's opportunity maybe to adjust that, or is it better to maintain that? Because obviously, from a municipality standpoint, that's completely up to whatever their decisions would be themselves, whereas as a county, we've only got one at this point, and we can't really, I would say, I guess, shift or maneuver that to another portion of the county, given the way land is currently structured.
So you're saying to keep the designated growth area in that?
Yeah, so I was just kind of curious what your take was on that.
Yeah, I mean, typically, you know, in my experience, looking at what's already established there and building upon it, as opposed to, like, you know, taking it away and shifting it. That's just, you know, what my experience has been. You know, if you have had any thoughts on that. But I don't really see any detriment per se by removing it.
Because I know and you know, I think Paige mentioned it earlier, sometimes people have a perception, and, you know, sometimes the perception of we have too much growth, which obviously statistically, this doesn't show that. As much as we want to feel that, and, you know, we all may drive down the road and we feel that congestion, but then, you know, we have individuals that move into that portion of the county, and I'm not picking on them, it's just an area that's very heavily noted for that concern, is they feel that they're seeing all that pressure and growth, and there is a lot of pressure and growth down there. I don't think any of us can argue that.
That's right.
But I think the challenge then becomes, whether it's down there or it's the northern part of the county and it being super rural, where's the perception and where's the reality? And I don't know, and I'm not speaking for myself, I'm just talking out loud, I don't know if we as a community need to do a better education of actually what is occurring in this county. And I think this study definitely shows some of that, because I think it takes some of that misinformation, I guess, and kind of fine tunes that to a more understanding position for the community as a whole. So I appreciate all the hard work on this, I really do.
Yeah, and you know, Tom, I totally agree with what you're saying about being a resident in the growth area that you're talking about. All I hear is, you know, we don't want this, we don't want that. And the truth is I do want growth. I want healthy growth. And I think I'll say it out loud, my concern about the growth in that part of the county is, you know, if we can't afford a traffic study, how can we afford to expand a school? And so that's where I'm coming from, because it's a chicken and egg. I mean, y'all are throwing it out there. You know, we need growth. We need the right kind of growth. And if we don't get the growth, we're not going to be able to meet the fiscal demands that the county government has. Just, you know, salary increases for teachers. You know, I think the concern concerning the growth on that end of the county is, okay, so bring it, but are we going to also be able to expand roads, expand schools, build the precinct, all that kind of stuff that we need, because there is growth. You know, we've never had a carjacking in 25 years, and now all of a sudden we've had one. You know, it's one.
We did.
You know, it's not the end of the world, but it's one. You know, so anyway, all right, never mind. I'm moving on.
That's kind of where, you know, kind of the same thing, like, you know, the comment I made about, you know, the misconception, what you were saying about, you know, is getting out and dispelling any of that type of stuff. Not to say that it's not, but, you know, like I said, I grew up in Anne Arundel County, and to me, Carroll County was, oh, that's a farm, that's the middle of nowhere, and it's not, you know what I mean? And then same thing with you, like you said, and we've seen it a couple of times, like, you know, a lot of the feedback with the fueling station that was proposed, it was, you know, we don't want this, you know, we don't want that, but okay, well, it could be a good thing, because it's going to clean the corner up, and you're going to get the income from, obviously, the development of it and all that type of stuff, but it's the same thing, you know, people that have been here for 30 years, well, we don't want any of that, okay, well, we have to have that, but then some of those people might also be the first ones complaining when, well, okay, now we have to raise your taxes exponentially because we do have to, like I said, with EMS going, you know, public, so now we have to pay those salaries, teacher salaries, like, you can't have one without the other, I guess.
Okay. Do we have any other questions that haven't been addressed?
Can I make one?
Yes, you can.
Well, it's more of a comment than a question, but reading the study, I noticed that the municipalities, their comprehensive plans were we're not in sync. We're offbeat a little bit here. Some haven't been updated since 2010, 2013, 2019, I guess, was the most recent. So just a statement, we need to all get on the same page here.
So are you saying any good consultant would go call on those cities and?
There's an opportunity for you guys.
Mary just wanted me to point out that 4 of the community comprehensive plans are in the process of being reviewed.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mary.
All right. So I guess the question is, do we need to make a motion to, no, we don't. Okay.
No, this is, so this study, along with some of the other work that we've been working on, the transportation plan and so on, it's just one more puzzle piece that we're pulling together that's going to be working towards the comprehensive plan update that we'll be embarking very soon. So this is more, there's nothing to adopt, there's nothing to approve. This is a consultant providing input as to their observations and what the community has come up with and so on. So it's all information. And then following this, we will be presenting it to the Board of County Commissioners so that they will have this information as well. And then over the next couple years, really, we'll be working on the comprehensive plan. So this is a very valuable piece of that. The transportation plan, the water resources element, the housing study that we're going to be starting very soon, all very valuable pieces that working with you all, the community, and then also the Board of County Commissioners to chart what is going to be the future direction, the plan for Carroll County looking to the next 10 years. Following that, so just, and I was just talking with Mary, and we'll be presenting to you all kind of what the next steps are then. But very generally speaking, once we come to a vision of the plan, the next step would be to be looking at zoning. So what kind of comprehensive zoning changes would need to be made to help envision that plan, the new plan? And then the following step would be what kind of regulations, so code changes to help the mechanism of what the plan is. So there's a multi-step process that we'll be going through, but we'll get into more detail with you all. But that was a long answer to a simple question that no, there's no action needed for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Well, very informative, certainly a lot of work that went into it. We appreciate that. We do have one member of the public that has sat patiently through this. So, you're happy? Okay, so there's no.
Good evening. It's been very interesting. I did attend 2 of the focus groups. My name's Stephanie Szymanski. I live in Westminster. I am a tiny little owner of a piece of property that I grew up on, which is adjacent to the Beatty property in Eldersburg. And I guess I have a couple of comments. One comment about Eldersburg, Commissioner Gordon kind of hit on it, but recently, Carroll Highlands, there was a proposed building from a commercial realtor who wanted to put up a storage unit that's about 5 stories high, and the very brave homeowners there got together and they kind of got it squashed, I hope. At least they might get it shorter than the developer wanted to do. I think the thing with Eldersburg, and having grown up there, when I was okay, I'm going to be honest with you. When I was growing up there, it was all fields. Where the Home Depot is, it was all cornfields. And believe me, I know because we lived right on the edge and we played there. And watching it change through the years, I moved away, but my brother still lives there, my nephew lives there, my aunt lives there. They've been affected by a lot of growth, a lot. And I guess my opinion is that, is it really necessary to continue to really dump all that on the Freedom area? And you have to remember, Freedom is not a municipality. It's just an area that the county called a growth area. And they did that, as it turns out, like 60 years ago. Good grief, I was really little then. So I just think there should be some changes to allow the people who own homes and property in Eldersburg get a chance to say, hey, we would like a little bit of open space. I don't think that's unreasonable anymore. I really don't. So anyway, through the years, when the comprehensive plans were built for Freedom, my parents and my grandparents would not say anything. They would never come to a meeting like this. They felt very uncomfortable having conversations like this because they had been through things that were not pleasant through their years. So I just wanted to say that thank you for everything. Thanks for listening. Oh, I did want to note the Beatty property, the multi-use. I would question that as a definition. It looks like it's like 7 warehouses and then a lot of houses, which is going to increase your traffic, which is already pretty heavy there. And having, I mean, when I was growing up there, the fields are still there right now. The Beatty field's still there. At least last time I went to visit it was. And it's, as you can probably tell, I'm very emotional about this. And I don't want to tell Todd Beatty he can't do what he wants to with his land. But I do think as owners that are next door and adjacent to it, we should be able to say a little something and ask that some consideration be given to the people who live in Eldersburg. They've been watching it grow and grow and grow and grow for a long, long time. I mean, Long Meadow was there when I was living there. I grew up next door to it. And that was one of the first developments, along with Carroll Highlands, that was in that area. And other than that, even where Oscar's Ale House is, that was a farm. So thank you very, very much for listening to me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, if I may for just a second.
Sure.
So, just so you know, the Carroll Highlands self-storage, they've withdrawn that. So that's no longer being processed. And I also wanted to very sincerely thank you for coming out, because this process, and this is just one component, the study, absolutely needs to engage the citizens. We're doing this for the citizens.
Thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, because, like I said, my parents and my grandparents, they lived right there, and they would never have ever done that. My dad used to come and complain about taxes, but he would go and talk to the commissioner about that for what good it did. He just did it because it was his ability to do it. But I think communication is really, really the key. Knowing when these meetings are. And I was amazed at how many people came to the town halls that Commissioner Austin held, and the one that was special about Carroll Highlands. I mean, people were really, really way more upset than me. So, and I get it. I get it. I watched when they were digging up my grandparents' property to put the sewage lines through and the water lines through. And it was, I felt, well, a little bit. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. And I will say, we do have these meetings, and we do depend, when it's something that affects people, we see a pretty good turnout. So we do get a lot of input, and we do listen. So, but thanks for being here. Thank you. So, okay. So We are down to number 10. And, and thank you all for all the work that you've
Yeah,
done.
it's terrific.
Yes, it was very valuable, so.
I'll give a plug to Paige and Andrew and Chris, like, really strong team, and to be that small and have that much tasked of them, just as an outsider, was really impressed with the passion that they have for the county, their knowledge of the county. I was just very impressed from working with you all, so thank you all.
Yes, it has been a pleasure. I can speak on behalf of my team and just the county as a whole. We really have enjoyed getting to know the county more and working with staff, and it's really been a fun project. And so thank you for allowing us this opportunity to be part of your community.
So you're saying that you're gonna help with the industrial growth and you're gonna relocate your offices here? That's what I just heard.
Step number one.
I've moved 14 times in my life, so what's another one?
Well, we thank you.
Yes.
So,
So you're to 10.
Number 10.
we're number 10, yes,
So we need a motion to adjourn.
we do.
Did I just make it?
Yes,
I
you
make a
did.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.